Hi, my name's Kenny Pittock. I'm an artist from Melbourne and I like to paint, draw and make things out of clay. Today, you're going to be making a sculpture of your own. It's going to be a sculpture of an apple, inspired by this absolutely fantastic painting by Sybil Craig. This painting is in the Shepparton Art Museum collection and was painted by Sybil in the 1940s. So, the first thing we're going to do before we even get to our clay is to draw an apple. So if you have an apple in the house, you can go get it now. But if you don't have an apple handy, then you can always just draw one from your imagination. So the first thing we're going to think about is that an apple is round, but it's actually also quite flat on the top and the bottom. It has those indentations to stop it sort of rolling away like a tennis ball. And the other thing that we can't forget when we're drawing our apples is the stem. Now apples grow on trees and the stem is what connects the apple to the tree's branch. So it's a very important part of the apple. Okay, so now that we've drawn some apples and we've thought a lot about the different shapes and colours that apples come in, we can pick which apple we like the best from our drawings. I think I like this one, and now let's get out the clay. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do once we've got our clay ball in front of us is to just smooth it out and try and get it into basically the shape of a tennis ball, just using our thumbs at this point really, and you might even want to sort of roll it on the table. The other thing that we're going to do is think about the size of the apple. Is this too big? Where's our apple gone? There it is. So as you can see, this is too much clay for this apple, so I'm going to get this tool, but if you don't have one of these, you can also use a knife or a paddle pop stick. And we're just going to take away some of this excess clay that we don't need because it's trying to just get it to the right size. Now you have to remember as well that clay does shrink when it gets fired in the kiln, but not too much. So just a little bit bigger than you want it, but this is obviously much bigger than we want it at the moment. Okay, so we've got it pretty round. Now we're going to start to think about which side's up, which side's down, and just using our thumb, or you might even want to use the end of a paintbrush, we're going to give it a nice little indentation, like this. So this is the top of the apple. And then down here is the bottom. Now the next thing we're going to do is scoop out the insides. Now this is a very important part because if you just put an apple sculpture like this in the kiln to be fired, it might explode because all of the air bubbles inside the clay would all be trying to get out. And so really, clay shouldn't be more than 1 centimeter, maybe 1.5 centimeters thick. So to do that, I'm going to use this scoopy tool, but if you don't have one of these handy, you could also use a teaspoon or a knife. So we're just going to, from the bottom of the apple, just scoop out all the middle of the apple. Now, this is quite tricky to do without, you can't press in too hard on the apple or it'll lose its shape. You don't want to go too thin so that you get a hole in the top. You have to be very careful. So I'll just keep all this clay safe so I can use this again on something else. Maybe another apple. It's almost got enough for a second apple right here, don't we? So I'll give you an example of what I mean with hollowing it out. So this is a sculpture I made of a chocolate cake. But you wouldn't actually want to bite into this chocolate cake because it's made of rock hard clay. So if you can see from the underneath how I've hollowed it out there. So I've not done it too thick, not done it too thin. I've scooped out all of the cake, or in this case clay. So it's about 1 centimeter thick. So that's about what we're trying to do with our apple as well. And I'm pretty happy with the thickness of the apple here. It looks pretty delicious. And the last thing we're going to want to do before we let it dry is make the stem. So we'll just take some of our unused clay on the side, and just using our fingers we'll kind of roll it, maybe even roll it like this, just to get into like a wormy, snaky apple stem shape. Then I'm gonna just use this little knife, but you could use your fingers or a stick or a spoon or whatever you've got handy, just to kind of get it into that shape that you want it. Okay, so that's pretty good for the stem. So what I might do is just cut a little hole in where I'm gonna put that stem, and then to join it I might get a paintbrush and just dab on a little bit of water, and then softly, carefully smush the stem in, and then with a little bit more clay we're going to just fill in the area around it so that it doesn't fall over. These are the fun details to do. They're the tricky bits, but they make the apple really look lifelike. Good enough to eat. And there we go. We've got our apple ready to dry. So basically we want to leave it for 1 to 2 weeks. I would say 2 weeks, and we're just going to put that somewhere cool and safe, so out of the way so that we don't knock it. And we're just going to let that sit and dry for about 2 weeks. And once we've done that, it should look a little something like this. So this is a sculpture that I made 2 weeks ago, and as you can see, even by the color, it's drier, and the feel, this is very wet, whereas this is bone dry. And once we've got our dry apple, it's time to glaze it. So I've decided that I want my apple to be red, so I'll give my glaze a bit of a shake, just mix all the pigments together, and then just using a paintbrush we're going to apply the glaze. So this is just an underglaze, and basically we want to do it very thin. If you put glaze on too thick, it will dribble and drip, and we don't want dribbles and drips, but also that might lead to cracking. So it's very important that we just apply a couple of coats, very thin and very even. The other important thing is to not paint too closely to the bottom of the apple. So if you can see, I'm leaving about 1/2 centimeter gap there, just so that the glaze doesn't stick to the bottom of the kiln. Because if it does that, we might not be able to take it home. It might be stuck in the kiln forever. So it's very important that you just leave a little gap between the bottom of the apple and where it will sit on the kiln. And voila! Our apple is ready to be fired. Okay, well, I guess I'll see you once we get back from the kiln. Okay, so I've just gotten back from the kiln and my apple is looking absolutely fantastic. So you might decide that your sculpture is finished now, or if you'd like to make it a little bit shiny, and if you've got some clear gloss glaze, just give it a few coats with that and then put it through the kiln again at a slightly higher temperature. Now that we've finished our apples, give yourself a big round of apple applause. Once I got started making apples, I could barely stop. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.